Welcome to the Software Generation Training Snippet Series. Today we'll be covering What's New series in Sage Pro ERP 7.7, and we'll be covering specifically the Accounts Payable and Purchase Order module changes. I'd like to thank Jennifer Schwartz, the product manager from Sage Pro, and Tom Bucci, the technical support analyst for Sage Pro ERP at Sage Software, for their assistance. I will be your host today. My name is Stephen Morin with Software Generation. Okay, let's take a look at what's available in the Accounts Payable Purchase Order feature list for Sage Pro 7.7 improvements. First of all, we're going to be covering the 1099 improvements, handy little things, makes it much easier to edit and send out your 1099s. We're going to go over the new buttons and time-saving options in bank reconciliation. We're going to be running through the import vendor price list functionality. And finally, we'll be covering the landed cost PO for landed cost items. First, the 1099 improvements. We did have some edit capability in the past, but mostly people had to actually bring up the database files to edit the 1099 information in the past. We've improved that so that you no longer have to do that. You can now edit the 1099 information directly in the vendor file. So if you pick up a 1099 vendor, you will see the 1099 tab. And on that tab, it'll have this year's and last year's numbers, and you can directly edit those numbers here. There's a procedure I think you should follow rather than just jumping right into doing this. And there's a couple of reports that'll help you out with this. So let's take a look at a new feature in System Manager. And that new feature is under Transaction System Recovery, Recalculate 1099s amounts. And what this will do will let you go back and actually recalculate the amounts on your 1099s based on what they think it should be based on check dates. Because remember, 1099s are cash, not accrual basis. Okay, so I've set it to not update the records and display the discrepancies to the screen. And I put it on company 99, and what will happen is it'll go through company 99 and it will recalculate the 1099 amounts, and even though I got no discrepancies, if I did have discrepancies, it would have printed them out and I could have seen them, and then I could have gone back and corrected them. Now remember, it's a cash basis, so it's going to be on a date basis. So it's going to look at the dates that you actually ran the checks. There is another report if you find discrepancies at that level to go back in and run, and that report is the 1099 register. And you can run this to the detail level, and what it will tell you is basically if you have discrepancies on specific items. So as you can see from this report here, vendor GBR1 had a 1099 item that's out there right now. And what we see is the invoice amount was $52.50, but the 1099 amount was the same, so there shouldn't be a discrepancy. Here we have another one that's actually still open right now, so there's no previous payment on the 1099 amount. The 1099 balance to be put in the future is $4,500. Remember that when entering 1099s, you can specify the different amount goes on the 1099 than goes on the actual check, and that's where these discrepancies may arise. So two ways you can get these issues. One is the amount may not be designated as a 1099 amount. When the check is cut, it wouldn't get put into the 1099, or it simply was completely left off even though it should have gotten a 1099. And with those reports, you should be able to correct it. Remember, in the System Manager report, you do have the option to actually go in and recalculate this and have it come up with new numbers if you want to do that. Okay, and finally, the last resort is if you want to actually change your 1099 numbers, you can go into maintain, oops, sorry, wrong module, go into maintain vendors and select the vendor with a 1099, click here and simply edit their amounts. One more thing I'd like to cover, there is a setup item in AP that will allow you to set an alarm, a 1099 warning beginning and warning end date, that allow you to set an alarm, and when you're making check runs between these dates, then it will automatically warn you that you're inside of the window to close the 1099 year and to actually build the files. And that is actually here, which is the close 1099 year function. Okay, let's go back. I think we've pretty well covered the 1099. Let's move on to the bank reconciliation improvements. The bank reconciliation improvements are items that were added to the bank rec to basically speed up your ability to do your bank reconciliation. So the first one is a button on the select here that instead of having to select each item on the reconcile account entry and where they're imported from one at a time, we now have a select all button which will then mark all of them, and you can say go and it will import all of these. The reason for selective import is because you want to get a cutoff that's very similar to what your bank does. So you're not looking at checks cut after the cutoff date in the list and having to handle those. So you want to do this cutoff at the same time, usually month end that your bank does the cutoff. Okay. The second item is a couple of items on the tops of the screens that will help you locate records and sort the grid header. So you can sort by the grid header now, and you can search on the sort records. And here is the new search function. So we very much like the search function available in the data drillers or on the bottom of any kind of pick list in the system. And here is the sort order item. So let's take a look at that. So now if I want to, I can click on the top of this particular bar and I can then sort by the way that it's actually by the item at the top of the list. So that's a handy little feature if you want to flip your list around and look at it in a different way. The other thing is up here is I've added this find button. So let's say I want to find all the payees whose names contain a letter A. And I click this button and it finds the first one, which is Atlanta Trust, and I click for the next and for the next and for the next, and it looks like everybody pretty much has an A in their name. Eventually, I'm sure I'll find one that doesn't. Skipped PG and E. It does not have an A in the name. And I can look up and locate that particular check that I want to work with. So I also have the option here to show cleared or uncleared only. So I can, checking them off, I can work a little faster. So those are enhancements made specifically to speed up your ability to do bank recs and make life a little bit easier. Okay. All right. Import vendor price list. We do have the ability to import vendor price list cost. It was in a prior version, but it's been substantially improved in this particular version. Before you had to go through a basic import export. Now we've set up a complete import and export capability inside of the system. So let's go over POs and go to maintain cost levels. And we pick up a vendor in the system and that has cost items. Vendor actually has a item setup graph for at $1 on the current level. There's only a one level cost level here. Prior to this, I could export this out to Excel or import it back in from Excel and edit it in that level. But now I have a complete import capability, very similar to the other import capabilities inside of Sage Pro Series. So I'm going to say that I want to do a Excel file. I'm sorry, I want to do a DBF file because that's what my file is going to come in as. I could do comma separated values, Excel, DBF, or even XML file. I'm going to do Fox Pro database file, and I'm going to go find the file. And I previously created this file, so there it is, and it has an item in it, ready to go. So I go next. I have to fill in the vendor number. Sorry about that. It only ends up one vendor at a time. And notice that the items template to be imported exactly matches the item import file that's a temporary file I'm using. Why? Well, because what I did is I actually use this button right here to create the template, and that will export a file format that you can then use to put your data in for import. So it makes it very easy to just hit this button, create an actual template to use, and then go through and put the data into it. Or if the vendor sends you a list, import it into it. Next, they all match up, And I can just simply continue through. There's the record and just click next. And I do have to hit the map button, don't I? So they're all mapped now, and I'll do next. And there we go. I'm ready to bring them in. I just tag it, and it will bring it in. And it will produce a report if there are any discrepancies, an exception report to tell me if anything's wrong. So with the template, much easier to use, much easier way to import directly into the system. So there's a new button there to launch that import wizard. You can use multiple types. I went through some of the data types and the mapping and the saving of those templates. The exception report is available to show you what doesn't actually come in and why it doesn't match up. It'll automatically complete the posting, and you can use the vendor part number rather than your part number to import these if you have the vendor part number set up in the system. Okay. In order to use this, the items must be assigned to the supplier. If that item is not assigned to the supplier, it will produce an exception. It must be pre-assigned, and you can only bring in one supplier at a time. You can't take multiple cost changes from multiple suppliers and bring them all in at once. Okay, moving on, the auto LCPO for landed costs. This is automatic landed costs, and basically this is to prevent data errors. Not real tricky, but basically when you go to do a PO, you go in and you set up a PO. And you can specify landed cost, but say you forget to specify landed cost and you go to bring the first item in, and we're just going to bring in some CAD software. And we'll take 2 of those. We need to order 2 of those for our customers. And we'll continue. And then we're going to bring something in called bad CD. And it turns out that that is a landed cost item. It is set up in the landed cost warehouse. And as a result, it pops this message on the screen. So what happens at this point is I've got this message, item bad CDs landed cost item. Do you want to convert this PO into landed cost? It will then modify the receiving location to the location in the landed cost warehouse, in my case land 1, and it'll update the ship to address to that warehouse. So if you have a separate warehouse address that says, you know, in case it comes in with a landed cost, I want to make sure people know, so I've got a slightly different address on it, it will then change to that address. Notice this caution, all items on this PO must already be set up in the land 1, or I'm going to say yes. Go back to Pro, say yes. It will tell you that item CAD 4 is not located on landing cost warehouse 1, and would you like to add it? And at this point you can add it or you can delete it from the PO. And I'm going to say go ahead and delete it from the PO, and I now have only this item. So the idea is to prevent you from inadvertently putting a landed cost item on a PO. All right, so this improves the PO accuracy through automatic recognition of any landed cost items that are set up in the landed cost warehouse. You can still ship it to other warehouses, but it will catch it. It supports change void POs, blanket orders, and bids. It does not support recurring POs. A little feature I'd like to tell you about that affects virtually all modules. Kind of nice to have. Say you're actually in doing a PO and you've started a PO for a particular item. And at this point, you decide that you want to change a PO, or maybe you've saved it, and I'm going to save this one. No, I want to re-enter that. Sorry about that. I got to order some items, or it's not going to let me do this. And do page down, and it's on the save button, and I'm going to save this, and it was $11.97, and I'm going to say I don't want to print this right now. None, and without going out of the screen, I can click on this button, and I'm now in change mode, and I can go back to $11.97 and change it. So it just saves you a little bit of time flipping between the options right here with this new button. So go in and play with this a little bit. It allows you to flip between the enter and the change options on a lot of different screens. It's not just on the PO screens. It's kind of a feature I like to mention. Okay. All right, that's the end of our Sage Pro ERP 7.7 snippet on accounts payable and purchase orders. There are other videos in this series, the overview and technical, accounts receivable and sales orders, and miscellaneous videos that are available if you'd like to take a look at those. Thank you very much for joining us at Software Generation today.